What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Glenda?
Yes.
We have to do a new ad.
We do.
It's a solemn time. Our long-time sponsor of the show, George Kittredge,
Yes.
very, very sadly passed away. And we formerly used to advertise for him his Rowdy Hound boxes.
We did.
So we don't actually know what's happened with Rowdy Hound boxes. You know anything about that?
I looked at the website. It said that they're recalibrating since their founder and boss has passed. But nonetheless, I think that you and I want to honour the memory of George Kittredge anyway. He was a friend to both of us, a hell of a good guy, and he supported us almost immediately. He was on board through and through, and I just don't want any of us to forget George. He was a terrific human being.
So we intend to continue to advertise Rowdy Hound, even though we don't know what's going on with them, in the hopes that they keep going, and that can be a bit of George's legacy that we're able to continue to promote.
I hope so.
In checking it out, we had a look to see, because we're not real good with the sponsorship. So we had a look to see who's actually paying for sponsorship. And we have a list of people to tell you that we support. And the first is our sugar mama, Barbara de Groot.
She's been with us from the start as well. Barbara's been an absolute staple in our...
She's a gem.
She is a gem.
She has a business.
She does. From the Heart Dog Training.
From the Heart Dog Training.
Yeah.
You can check it out. But she supports us as much and more than anybody ever has. So we appreciate you very much, Barbara. Another person who's supported us from the start.
The Einzelwiener.
Einzelwiener.
The Bullfed.
The Bullfed.
Yep.
It's where I get all my stuff.
Yeah.
It is, truly. It's where I get all my dog gear. If I need something, Jason's my first point of call. I don't use his shit website. He has a website. It's dog shit. I just message him directly. You guys probably should use his shit website, but I don't.
Yeah, because you don't want to message him directly and get his grumpy ire of the day.
Yeah, but do it. Get all your dog stuff from Jason. He's got everything you need. He's got all the shit that you need to train a dog for realty.
Everybody who comes to seminars and looks at meals and asks me meals questions, ask Jason.
Yeah.
Jason can point you in the right direction for getting the meal that's best suited for you.
I really like his leashes. I'm a big fan of his leash pack. That's why I sort of convinced him to do it. But anyway, get your stuff from Einzelwiener.
Yep.
Do you know who has a fantastic website and ships internationally?
My wife?
Your wife,
Yeah.
Canine Pharmaceuticals.
I couldn't imagine her not having a good website, how much of a perfectionist she is.
Well, the products are amazing. My dog merely being alive is a walking testimonial to that. My dog, who I've retired numerous times and has come out of retirement when I've managed to get his body back to healthy, and a big part of that is related to Canine Pharmaceuticals. So check it out, everybody.
I could say so many nice and biased things about Canine Pharmaceuticals and my wife, but what I will say is ignore me. Just look at testimonials. The testimonials speak for themselves. That's where the field trials are working. What makes Narelle's day, and mine as well, is when people are emailing in and sending messages of, well, primarily people have had no hope in the past because just everything that they were trying wasn't working, and now it is. And that is the testament that something is actually really working. And the other thing which I will add, one of the things that Narelle's told me in the past is dogs are incapable of understanding the placebo effect.
Oh, that's a good point.
So you can fake it on a human, but you can't fake it on a dog.
I never thought about that before. That's actually a really good point.
Well, my wife's actually a very smart person.
There you go.
So she's told me that humans are subject to the placebo effect where dogs are not. So it either works or it doesn't on dogs.
There you go. That makes total sense.
Yep.
There's one other person who puts a fair amount of work into this show.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. Funny about that.
And I have a digital product that you can buy. If you go to my website, seriousdogbusiness.com, right now I've got 2 courses available to you. The Overview, which is a small course where you could learn how I teach.
Yep.
But the other one is the Wave Tops, which is a bigger course. It's everything I know about dog training. Well, it's not everything. It's a lot of what I know about dog training.
Yeah,
Check it
terrific.
out.
Yeah.
$500 dues. That's all it's going to cost you.
I recommend it when people are saying, what do I do? How do I get in the industry? I recommend them to your course.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks,
Yeah.
sir. All right, on with the show. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart. I'm joined today by my co-host, Glenn Cook. And joining us for the second time around, we're blessed to have Dr. Melanie Uhde with us. I nearly said it right. I tried really hard. Dr. Melanie, welcome. Thank you for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me again. Such a pleasure to be here second time.
You're on the West Coast now, aren't you? You've transitioned from the East Coast to the West Coast.
I have, yeah, about now it's 7-8 months ago. Yeah.
What pushed that move?
I think that it was a mix of like, we've tried before to move to California, so we tried again. And kind of the growing dissatisfaction being in Atlanta in the South. It's just, it wasn't my cup of tea. And then, being more and more involved with certain people in the dog world that I appreciate who all happen to be, I don't know, accumulated in California. It made sense. So here we are.
Nice. We had you on the show. We were just trying to figure it out. It was over a year ago, maybe at 18 months ago. And you had just started with your social media stuff that was gaining a lot of traction. And we were super interested in it and talked about how cool and exciting it was to have such a professional person with real letters before and after their name that can justify the bro science that we spruik and say, no, that's the real science. That's the real stuff. And we're really happy about that. But what's been happening in your world between last time you're on and now?
It's kind of funny. I think with you guys, you were my first official podcast event ever since I kind of started to put out that content. Like your invitation was the very first, and then a bunch of other invitations came after, and then ever since. Right? And I do remember we talked about something like dopamine, right? Like the pleasure molecule and all that seems so cute now compared to what I have to talk and face nowadays, which obviously still are very relevant topics and all, but it has certainly evolved. It became much more deeper and not more or less scientific because it still stays in the realm of the science. But I think it has been touched by a lot more people that obviously support a certain way of thinking, but also people that hate the way I think about it or how I share my stuff. So what's been going on ever since is it has deepened in terms of like the themes that I cover, but also how much research I put in and how much I have learned moving forward with my own dogs. And now a whole new world has opened up with my new male puppy and working very closely with Michael Alice and all. Obviously, no one ever stops learning, and more things just kind of come together. It's like a big puzzle piece, which is really exciting. And at the same time, covering like one mission certainly is and probably always will be until the day it is not anymore. The strong narrative that, science has been weaponized for a certain camp. This is something that I really care about, but this is not all I do. On the other hand, what I do care about also is this idea of dogs and outside of training, the longevity of it, the health span of it, outside of just the science of, what is the best dog training method? Also, how do we keep them healthy? What is actually science of physical activity? What is the actual science of best nutrition? Glenn, I'm sure your wife and the gut-brain axis and all that kind of comes into that play too. And your wife has probably a lot of ideas there too. But that kind of stuff, that is also kind of, okay, in between training sessions, what do we really do with our dogs here? And do we know what we should be doing? Or can we do anything better?
We're going to get into the content that you've been making. You have unfortunately found yourself embroiled in many battles, and we'll talk about that. But I suppose one thing that we thought might be really interesting is, since you were last on, is there a paper you've read or has something actually been discovered? Is there something new that you've been reading and looked up and go, wow, oh, that's cool. That's a new piece of information that I now have to change things. I have to work that into my training program. I have to change the way I think because this new piece of information has come out. And if not, since when we last spoke, when was the last time that actually happened for you?
I do think it happened quite a bit since we last spoke. And sometimes I read something and I'm so excited about it. And then I realize I'm really just excited about it, but I actually have no idea how I would translate that into dog training. So then it just, lingers in the universe of what I will come back later. And maybe it finds its way into it because I don't necessarily always find the direct line to how I basically interact with dogs. Just because the science that I read isn't often with dogs. Because as we know, it's very, very hard to get really good in-depth scientific understanding of things with the subjects of dogs. So I use other studies that are mainly done in other animal models. So it's sometimes, you got to be careful what you can directly translate. But one of the other things that I've been diving into lately, and, as much as it seems to be such a, no pun intended, threatening topic, is literally threats and fear and how that and avoidance learning. And that has happened like in the last 2-3 months, maybe. I wouldn't say there was a new paper published, but they all have been published in the last, let's say, 2-3 years. So I'm like just starting to stumble over them. And very classic thing that happens when you know something and then you read something and then something else comes out and it's like, oh my God, it makes so much sense. And that all happened in the realm of, well, what we consider fear, but what, is not being considered fear anymore, but more so just the detection of something threatening or discomforting, and how basically research is now shifting to what is understood about that part of learning or that part of being alive or seeing life. And that all directly applies to dog training and dogs itself. And it has turned out to be a very, very intellectual journey. And it's not just how we talk about this kind of like, I'm afraid, so I avoid kind of things. There's so much more happening, which I'm still, working on kind of getting it all out and processed in my own brain before I can communicate it. But that has been something very, very interesting to me because, we have, I think, milked and squeezed everything out of the dopamine and seeking and reward systems. But I think there's like, again, in the context of also of dog training, more to learn about the avoidance learning itself.
Just on that, Melanie, I've got a question, and it's inspired from listening to a few other podcasts as I've been traveling around, mainly Joe Rogan, Huberman, and Diary of a CEO. They've been some of in my top 10 list of listening to podcasts. My question to you is, how much of the actual science literature out there do you think is factual based rather than manufactured to follow a narrative? And the reason I ask that is because there's been testimony brought forward from some of the guests those hosts have had on their podcast where they've said that the science that's now been reported, not all of it, but certainly a large portion of it has been funded to go in that direction. And that's what I kind of fear is happening in our industry a lot. There's a lot of people who report on science, and we were having a bit of a laugh before about people who maintain this status of follow the science, trust the science until it's a science that they don't like. And then they'll do everything that they can to debunk it. But then when you dive deep into it and you actually get learned people and people without an agenda or people who aren't governed by emotions, when they look through it, they uncover that this is real science. Like, this is how the real world works. And this is how not only humans form an understanding, but also the animals around us as well. Where do you sit with that? How do you find that is working within our world or our industry?
Well, it's a big question. I think that's tough to answer because, there are like multiple levels of how ultimately science is being communicated. So there's someone who funds science. Maybe before that step, there's a researcher or research group that applies for money because obviously, everything costs money. And then all the way at the end, there's someone who is not a scientist in the real world, consumes what's being published and draws conclusion from it. And in between, there are a lot of other steps that kind of pivot the narrative into one or the other direction. And that could be just how, for example, in a publication, the discussion is being interpreted by the researcher. Now, we always say, like, yeah, this is a completely biased research paper, maybe from the dog training world. And they have been funded by an institution that is known to be pure positive. Sure. I mean, that happens. It's one level of bias. I wouldn't say that makes it completely invalid, but it certainly pivots how that person would interpret its own results. But even if the money did not come from, a certain institution that has a certain worldview already, it still is in the researcher. Everyone is still biased towards one way or another, just like by the information that you consume. And then the discussion is written in a certain way. And then there comes the reader who also has a certain worldview and then takes away the things that for that person makes sense. And then it's being communicated, so information gets lost. So there is no such thing as like purity in science and science communication. I don't think so. And what I find more and more, the more I kind of do like big sweeps of research across multiple papers, whatever you want to find, you can find it. Like if you want to find something where, and I'm doing something, this experiment in my own head, if I wanted to find something where, I don't know, banana can cause cancer, you may not find like a super high prestigious paper with it, but someone will have mentioned something along the line where someone says banana will cause cancer, right? And you also find the opposite. And I find this to be true for a lot of things, because oftentimes each paper looks at one specific thing, and that one way or another fits in the bigger picture, but it can fit in the bigger picture either in this direction or in this direction. So you gotta have to have a bigger, broader picture understanding of things to put it into context. And that's where a pre-understanding of dog training per se, or like the experience of working with a lot of different dogs, helps, because then you have a little bit of a filter as to like what you immediately believe or not believe, right? And if you don't have that, then you're very much victim to like whatever the emotion is attached to whatever is being communicated. And science that's probably has always been like that. It's a little bit more difficult now because everyone has internet. Before internet, I think science wasn't much communicated because it stayed among scientists. But even going to science conferences back when I was working at Columbia University, like the kind of discussions that are being held is very similar, maybe a little bit more language-wise, a little bit more filtered, but very similar in terms of like, you're wrong, you're right, and the data shows this, no, the data shows that. And that happens just as much as it does on social media, but it doesn't blow so much out of proportion as it is nowadays. So I listen to Huberman, and occasionally I listen to Joe Rogan, whatever they discuss. And me personally, whenever I hear like these big science things, cold plunges, take a cold bath. I think Huberman was the one. And my husband really got into it, and he felt, that's maybe a good example, he felt the benefits, and then he looked into the science, like, wait a second, there is actually not really good science that really confirms that there are benefits of it that are being communicated, even by Huberman. And now all of a sudden he doesn't feel the benefits anymore, so he stopped doing it. So that's exactly how things happen often with science. So it's a little bit, I wouldn't say sad, because again, I don't think it's ever been different, but I think that the way of we have diluted the meaning or blown out of proportion the meaning of science and how it dictates now what we do can sometimes be a little bit tricky, especially in anything behavior related, whether this is our behavior or animal behavior. There's hard science, like discovering certain drugs for cancer, and you can very clearly say, does it have an effect on the proliferation of certain cancer cells or not? It is very quantitative, very easy to measure, but you can't really do this with anything that's behavior related.
That's a tricky part with behavior. Behavior, it's so contextually driven. Like, I read a lot. I have to admit, because I've been trying to make this course, I've intentionally not listened to any dog training stuff in about 18 months. Because the problem is when you're like, okay, I'm trying to make a course that has a really clear learning pathway and I'm happy with what I know. And then you're like, here's something new. And you're like, oh, now I have to fit that in. And so I had to exclude myself for a little while so I could make this work. And now I'm looking out again. But in that time, it's not like my brain turns off. So I'm still in the car a lot. I'm still listening to podcasts and stuff like that. So I stayed away from everything dog training and decided to sort of follow my own interests. I'm really into spirituality, which is very unscientific, which has this weird intersection with quantum physics, right? Which I know nothing about and am way too stupid to understand. But what I see is a lot of spiritual people just giving terrible interpretations and just misrepresentation of what the quantum field is and how it works. And to the point where even a dummy like me is like, no, that's not what it is, right? Yeah. But then I kind of zoom out and I have a look and I kind of go like, oh, dog trainers are doing the exact same thing, right? Like there's people who are going like, okay, like here's this really complex analysis of behavior. And then there's someone going, oh, no, but watch me do it. Like I'm fully doing exactly what you're talking about. You're like, no, you're not even a little bit. And I think that what we have sort of somewhat different to a lot of sciences, and this is something that, I'll steal the language from Ivan a little bit, is that what we have is an incredible lab. Like, I've got this incredible dog training lab behind me right here. And as a person who has no interest in, like, I'm not bound by any method. I don't give a shit. I don't have a proprietary system that I sell, like, it's just dog training, and I'm happy to change and do whatever that's successful. I get to try that shit out. I'm training a lot of dogs in here. And if I hear something that might work, trust me, I'm doing it, because all I'm interested in doing is being successful. And of course, success has to have a measure of the experience of the dog, right? Because there's plenty of ways to be successful where the dog has a horrific time. So that's a measure of success to me. The experience of the dog has to be good. But that's what I think has been super interesting when you see people saying things about behavior and you're like, I can't replicate your results. I can't get the same. I can't do it. And like, yeah, I'm not a scientist and I don't know how to write up a study. Yeah, I've read plenty, but I'm not an expert in that. No way. I haven't gone to school for that. But I tell you what I can do is train dogs. I'm pretty fucking good at that. And I can understand your analysis here. And if I can't, then you're probably doing a bad job of trying to influence the way that I train if I can't understand the analysis. Because that's one of the feedbacks I get is say, hey, you're doing it wrong. And I'm like, okay, well, explain it better. Because like, I'm not the smartest dude around, but I can figure it out. But I've got this space where I can actually put into practice what you're saying and find out, hey, that's not working. And we don't have to say, well, you're not manifesting the quantum field well enough. Like, no, I'm fucking doing the things. I'm clicking when you say I should click. I'm exposing in the way that it says I should expose. It's not fucking working. So I think that's what's interesting to us is we have that, like, no, I can do your tests. I can replicate your study right here and it ain't fucking working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I forgot. I mentioned that in one of the things that I put out. And when you actually dig into like the problem with replicating certain studies, it usually, and I don't want to say because it's a bad, field of science, but usually this happens within psychology because psychology always goes about how do you feel and with the emotions and what we observe more importantly. And I think they tested 100 random studies within the field of behavioral psychology, and 30%, like a third of them, were not being able to be replicated by other researchers. And the statistics didn't add up either. So that's a problem. That's a big problem because, we latch on things so fast, especially if they sound good. And then we lose track of like, oh, never, ever anyone was able to replicate these things. But that part doesn't sink in anymore. Already people have said too many times, but science says, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we have this weird like crossover from what happens within the science. And then even within the science world, like, a study came out and people probably agreed and then we all move on, right? It's not, even that is not a big deal within the science world because at the end of the day, everyone knows it's behavioral science and, sure, and whatever, right? But like within the public that uses science to make a point, they use it to be right. So they cannot be wrong, obviously. So they will not accept any revisions that way. So yeah, I can totally see how this is very upsetting, especially if you feel like you want to try and you want to incorporate what others have said and tried and done. And then you're like, doesn't work. Like, what's wrong? Is it me? Is it my dog? Is it, I don't know, the Australian sun? Doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah. But I think that's it. Like, I think for the overwhelming majority of trainers, of course, there are dogmatic people, right? And there's people who do it a particular way because the monkey before them told them that's how they had to do it. But for most of us, and especially people in their own business, and I think the key people that are looking for the best way to do everything is competitors, right? Like, if you're looking to win competitions, you're not looking to win competitions in your proprietary system. You want to win the competitions. And so we're looking everywhere. What's the best way? How do I do this? Because the best way is the way I want to do it. The most successful way is the way I want to do it. The way that puts me and the people I coach on the podium, that's the way I want to do it. And I'm not bound at all by some idea of what it is to be that. I want it to look successful. I want to be successful.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Pat and Melanie, because that's a narrative that we've certainly carried throughout the goodwill of the show, that a lot of the science that we've done is through observation. And to my knowledge, that's mostly what science is about. It's watching and observing changes over time. That's something that I've got to see in the backyard. And I've had debates and discussions and even arguments with people who are academic who have said to me, sorry, Glenn, but you just don't have the letters after your name to be able to support your argument. And I said, yeah, but I've got the mud on my boots, the scratches on my leg and the calluses on my hand. I acknowledge your hard work. I do. And I'm not saying that I discredit it, but you just don't have the field work that I've got. You haven't seen the changes. You haven't watched people having a relationship with the dog like I have. What you're saying doesn't make sense because I can't see it manifest any change with the people that I'm actually working with. Now, when I do it my way, I can see the change happening. I can see the dogs having a more fulfilled life, a better life. I can see the relationship improving. All of the things that you're saying to me in relative terms shouldn't be happening are happening. Yet you still want to argue this. Well, come out on the field, walk the path with me. Let me see you transcribing what you've done in the lab onto the field. And I was so pleased when people like Ivan have pushed for this, and yourself and many others in the industry, and you start seeing some of the literature that's been described to us that you've been debunking, Melanie, over time, which has been absolutely fantastic. Your transition you went from doing sort of TikToks where you're pointing to things on the screen where you'd written things to now personally narrating it and reading text to people, which I loved it before, but I love it even more now. Going back to what I was talking about before with what Ivan pushed for and a few other people pushed for was getting out on the field and saying, okay, well, let's make this samesies. We're going to present the stimuli and see how your dog behaves around that, absent the tools that you're saying is the devil's tool, and let's see how the dog actually behaves now. One thing that I found interesting but really infuriating was when you pointed out a lot of these things that were coming out were owner surveys. I mean, I nearly pulled the remaining hair out of my head that I've got left. And let me tell you, there's not a lot left there anymore. And I was sitting there going, what? What the actual fuck is going on in this world? Like, it's nice that people have an opinion about their dogs and care to chime in, but where do you get the actual science from people who they're turning up to a dog trainer because they don't know anything, and yet you've got these very emotional beings telling lovely stories about their dogs, and then people are writing it down as, oh, well, here's the evidence that will make it surmountable in our argument.
Yeah. Yeah. When I do remember how this all came together, because obviously someone cites the science and then you look at it, and the first thing I look at is kind of like what journal. Usually behavior science, you kind of find themselves in like a smaller journal because you can't have all this quantitative data per se. And then you look at like what type of study is been done because they have certain weight in terms of a scientific consensus, our buzzword here. And you cannot overestimate the value of a really good randomized controlled trial, but it's really, really difficult to do that. And technically, we don't have one single good randomized controlled trial in terms of dog training methods. But I also don't think we need to. I think we have it in the field enough, right? I don't think we need to actually set up a study for that. What would be more interesting would be rather a longitudinal study, because we also talk a lot about welfare of dogs, but we have not one single study that actually has good measurements for welfare. Yes, they're like, how positive is a dog? And they set up these experiments where, you put a food bowl in one corner, and then is the dog motivated to go to the food bowl, or is it hesitant? And if the dog is hesitant, they say it's because the dog has experienced aversive control in the past and is now not as optimistic anymore. By no means this isn't a good measure of welfare of a dog. And they're like some experiments that have been described, but it's not.
I think, sorry to interject. So just your very explanation of that, the way that you can hardly hold a straight face as you're saying it, people can only hear you, right? They can't see.
That's why I'm laughing.
You can hardly keep a straight face as you're saying that if a dog is hesitant to approach a food bowl in the corner, that's an indicator of aversive control having gone wrong. Me and Glenn both burst out laughing as you're saying it, because as real dog people who train real dogs, you know what a fucking outrageous thing that is to say, right? That there are so many factors that can go into that, and that, more than anything would be just an indicator of the level food drive of the dog. You know what I mean? Or what the dog is into. Like my own two dogs who, yes, have both experienced aversive control at some point in their life, like without a doubt. My Malinois, if you bring him into that room, is going to look at you and be like, surely me and you are about to fight. Like, come on, what are we doing here? Where my Springer is going to run straight to that food bowl because she's really highly food motivated, right? Yes. And she's going to be like, you're invisible to her until she eats all that food. Then she would notice you in the room and be like, oh, hello. Whereas my Malinois looks at people and goes, we're going to fight. I'll eat that food later. But right now, me and you are going to have some sort of argument about something. Like that's how his brain works. And that's so obvious to us, like so obvious. You can't say it without laughing. And even saying it makes me and burst into laughter. It's madness. But this is what people who are reading that going like, yes, dog does not approach food bowl, must have experienced aversive control. Tick. Yes, got it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, they don't even, it's like in the title, welfare is being mentioned in the title. They hear the conclusion that aversive control, the dogs, all welfare 3 months later, 2 months later after that training that they observe, whatever it is, show less optimistic behavior. And that's the setup. And people buy it. Right? And there is no control. If they had 20,000 dogs of all breeds and ages, and the biggest thing is there's no control for training history. Who knows what these dogs have experienced as a puppy in the womb, maybe even that kind of already drifted them in a certain direction. But these are like the highest weighted studies that we use to make big statements. And then comes this long tail when you hear people say there are hundreds and hundreds and thousands. I read comments like there are thousands and thousands of studies. Really, it's about 23, and 60% of them are surveys. And they're not just surveys, they're dog owner surveys. And that's where the biggest problem lies. For one, it's like you could wonder if they put all that effort into running these surveys, why not survey dog trainers? Like they're the professionals. Let's see what the results would be there. And it would not be anywhere near what we have concluded from these surveys. Aversive control makes the dog more reactive, aggressive, and anxious. Right? Maybe it would even be the opposite, right? But we survey dog owners. And that is being used, what I feel like is being used just to boost the list of references that they use without actually adding any qualitative weight in terms of the evidence in the science.
Something I just want to quickly insert there, which I've stated before on the podcast. The majority of people that I know in my field as balance trainers have been excluded from any studies or any questionnaires or any invitation to actually have a say in some of these surveys that you've been talking about.
They probably filter out certain things, or they're just distributed in certain ways that, it doesn't allow a certain contribution in the first place. Technically, you should run this in order to have even like a good representation of that population. You need to run it so that you don't.
Well, the talking heads seem to be agreeing with the same narrative, and it's very exclusive in who gets invited to the table.
Yeah.
The survey data thing blows my mind. Years ago when I was on the legislative committee, the IACP, is when I found out how much dog training data came from surveys. I feel a big part of being a professional dog trainer, especially someone that goes into people's homes, is learning to listen with compassion and empathy to what people's problem is, and then developing a plan to re-educate them, because everything they just told you about their dog was fucking wrong and misguided, and all the problems that they're saying are genetic or environmental are very often them. They've created the problem in the dog. And that's a huge part of our job. Like that's a huge part. When I have coached people, and it was definitely a big learning curve for me. We were in someone's home and they're telling you my dog does this because of X. And you're like, no, it fucking doesn't. I can tell, like with 100% certainty, that is not the reason that this is happening. And he's not the alpha or all the crazy shit that people tell you. And you then have to go, okay, I will listen to you say all that. Now I have to sort of show you why these behaviors you're describing are actually caused by something else, and reprogram your entire thought process about what is causing this so that you can be a part of the solution with me and help this dog onto a better life. When I found out that we're just going off survey data, I'm like, this is madness, because these are the very people who, like, we are letting the people who are relying on us to give them the correct information, we are allowing them to decide what that correct information is. And as experts, like, who are actually on the tools, and because we do this every day, like I'm seeing, however many dogs we see in our day compared to this person who has one dog and has a sample pool of one, right? The idea that we're going, oh, okay, well, so like you just tell me what you think is going on with your dog, and so will these other 10 people, and then I'll do and be influenced by whatever you tell me is going on. Like, that's how fucking ridiculous this is. And when you explain it like that, surely most people are like, yeah, that's stupid. That's an outrageous thing to do, right? But this is what people are quoting. This is the science that people are trying to throw in our face and tell us that we don't understand what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even then, like the hardcore extremists in that world, they still argue that how valuable these surveys are. Again, they have their role in the whole scheme of like how you conduct certain bigger research project. You kind of sample just to pinpoint where misunderstandings happen, where controversies lie. And then from there, you dig deeper, independent of what the direction is given by surveys, because then you're supposed to be setting up hypotheses and all that, which doesn't really happen because everyone has already made up their mind, it feels, in the science world. So it's really ridiculous. And I cannot think of any other field where this would be acceptable. Like, imagine my husband, he used to work as a mechanical engineer and he would design new tools for neurosurgeons. Imagine you would ask the patient, what tool do you think is best to cut in your brain? You tell me, and then I'll do it. Let's run a survey, right? It's ridiculous. No, it's obviously done with the experts who've done thousands of surgeries themselves. And then he would go and design these tools and then they would test it. And then, it's nothing to do with the patient at the end of the chain who would get a decision in this.
So I feel like we've set the stage a little bit. You have taken the fight of interpreting the science and doing a proper analysis in a way that you are uniquely qualified to do, having the qualifications that you do, the dog that you do, the experience that you do, and you've brought that fight to social media. What I want to do, rather than talking about, we've done it already, we've rehashed, we're all balanced trainers, we all understand, the reality of training dogs. What I really want to talk to you about is your experience over the last few months of having put your head above the parapet. Like, you've really exposed yourself and have been taking a lot of sniper hits for the rest of us. And I want to, first of all, we've actually been acknowledging you and thanking you probably the last 4 or 5 episodes in a row, ones that you haven't even heard yet that haven't come out, because we're watching this stuff every day and I'm looking in the comments and I'm watching the heat that you get. And I'm something of a social media coward. Like, I just can't fight people online. I just can't be bothered. One of the things that gets in my head is that I get in the idea that I'm having an argument with a chatbot. That does my head in as well. If I'm like, this isn't even a person that I'm arguing with, which is, highly likely these days. Yeah. Once I have that, like, I'm like, oh, I can't respond. And especially if someone's got like a really locked down profile, if I try and actually look at who they are and their profile's too locked down, I'm like, you fucking chatbot. You're just going to argue with me. I'm not today, Skynet. I'm not getting sucked into this. But you have been at it in an incredible way. But my God, you've been fucking attacked, right? Mm-hmm. And your credentials called into question, your legitimacy of whether your opinion is valid, which is wild considering that we're placing the opinion of random dog owners above yours. So because we're terrible hosts and we didn't properly introduce you, please just remind everybody what your actual qualifications are. And then let's talk about your experience of being told that they're dog shit qualifications and don't matter.
Okay, sure. I can streamline my background basically. So first I got a bachelor's in biology, that kind of fun fact, but I realized later because, you keep forgetting things that you've learned. One of my professors in animal physiology, he actually studied the gait of dogs. He started out with his own dogs and different breeds of dogs and how they changed their gaits and did some wonderful videos of it. He gives international talks and kind of all was about the animal physiology, but particularly with dogs. And I just realized this like 6 months ago. But anyways, that was my fun fact. Biology, master's, bachelor's, then a master's in biology. There I started to focus more on neuroscience and immunology, microbiology, really. Then I did my doctor at the Tropical Medicine Institute in Hamburg. Then I did my postdoc at Columbia University in New York. There I started to work on the gut-brain axis and how, for example, the gut function, not so much what you eat, I'm not like a nutritionist, it's really the physiology of your gut function, how this impacts anxiety, depression. So I got into the neuroscience part there more so. And then from there, took a break more or less because I didn't want to do academia anymore. Then I volunteered in Thailand, where I got faced with village dogs and the real world application of dog behavior, because they were chasing me on a bike and I didn't know what to do. And I did not like not knowing what to do. Then I got my own dogs. Then I did some advanced qualifications for anxiety with Stanford University while having my dog and training. And then I started Canine Decoded, and then I started posting. And now I'm here. So
Perfect.
That's wonderful.
Perfect.
Yeah. But again, like along the line, I want to stress that these things, and it's like, it kind of goes to one of the attacks often, that I'm not an animal behaviorist. And thank God I'm not an animal behaviorist, because I think they get really biased in terms of what they get to learn in school. And a lot of animal behaviorists that are still in school have reached out and said that they are kind of tired and almost regretting going down that path, because they can see how biased that is. The same with vets. But my foundations are in all the stuff that is biology related. It includes the physiology, hormones, right? Obviously the brain, the learning theory of all these things. But all the stuff that I'm sharing that kind of applies most to what I do with dogs is stuff that came out in the last 4 or 5 years. I completed my PhD over 10 years ago. Like, nothing that I learned 10 years ago is necessarily something that we need to apply on, let's say this, nothing that I think is valid to discuss was basically taught 10 years ago. But what I've been basically learning in all this stuff in my education is how to digest scientific information and how to put it into broader context of life, but then take these nuances from modern studies, because our dog training studies that we rely on, they're also from 10, 15 years ago. And you know better than I do, the dog training world was probably a little bit different 10, 15, 20 years ago, and how we saw we have evolved and we pull in modern science accordingly. And that's basically what I do. And that's what I've been doing more and more through my content as well.
That's an interesting point that you made about vets and behaviourists going to their relevant universities and schooling and etc. I got trolled a while ago where I made a comment on, I think it was our podcast or a show that I was on, where a few people came after me and said, how dare you attack the integrity of vets? It's a very sensitive world and they do so much for our dogs, which I fully acknowledge. And I believe that as a caveat, we've said that multiple times. And it's not the vets that I'm having a go at, because I love the majority of vets that I've worked with. I've had a great relationship with them, and I think they're really intelligent people. And certainly there's been a lot of them who've saved my dogs and colleagues' dogs and countless amount of dogs and cats and other animals out on the field. Now that I've explained the caveat side, the point that I'm trying to make is there's companies that groom them and influence them while they're students and while they're very impressionable, while they're still in school, and now they feel indebted, or they even have a conditioning that follows them around for a vast majority of their career until somebody comes out and interprets the data for them and says, hey, you know that food that you're selling people, do you know how toxic it actually is or how problematic it actually is? And you being a gut-brain barrier person and knowing a lot about microbiome and the vagus nerve, and I'm a real dummy in that. Narelle and you are really smart in that sort of field. So I know it just enough to be dangerous in it. But I do know that a lot of these companies who are grooming people and influencing them and throwing money after them and making them feel indebted and classically conditioning them to all the bells and whistles of all the data that they produce and the science that they put forward. Now you've got people who are thinking, yeah, look, this could be true. And then you've got a legion of people who are following them saying, yeah, this could be true. That's the people that I'm really going after. They're the devil in the story, the private equity companies who are pushing this malicious data. It was even funny. I don't want to hijack this too longer because you've got something to say, but I was listening to Joe Rogan talking about this before, and he said that with the obesity rates in America, it used to be that the poor people were always starving and looking for food. He said now the poor people are morbidly obese because they're getting all the shittiest food options. And he said, if I owned a company that was producing these terrible quality foods, you know, these carb-loaded, sugar-loaded foods, He said, I'd be making sure that I had bots online saying, stop fat shaming people, bigger is better, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I would make sure that I saturated the world with that narrative that was attacking people for going after morbidly obese people online and saying, you should be eating healthy, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And that coincides with Pat's concern before about finding out that you're arguing with a bot, because now you truly don't know. Now you really don't know, because you've got a faceless opponent out there and you don't know who is pushing this narrative and what agenda is actually being sought after to maintain a financial status over true science and true facts. So that's the thing that I do find alarming myself, because like I said, a common language that most of us have had is it just doesn't coincide with what you see in the field. And that's the struggle that I've always had in this. Anyway, back to you.
You're not wrong. If you really dig deeper, it's like one of those Netflix documentaries where something is uncovered, like the evil of money, and you go behind the scene of everything that you believed in, and you realize you've been tricked and lied to. And I think you can find this with everything that has been broadcasted in a way that makes everyone like flock to a certain direction. That if you really just pause for a second, just like, what happened to common sense? I mean, seriously, what happened to common sense? You don't find that much anymore on like social media, because it gets really crazy how much people are willing to go out just to defend their point of view, that they completely lost any touch with reality. And the other part is people love this controversy and putting things into categories. And if you're not this, then you're automatically means you're the opposite. I mean, if you say kibbles are not the best way of feeding a dog, you're automatically one who, I don't know, lets their dog shit out E. coli and salmonella everywhere because you're feeding raw food, right? There's nothing in between. Or even just saying, yeah, I do feed kibble. And actually, I have half raw and then a little bit of kibble that I also feed, but I also acknowledge it's not the best food. What's wrong with that? What can we just acknowledge? And then together point to, I don't know, the industry to push them to make better food for dogs that is maybe more affordable, right? Rather than saying, there's no study on raw food that shows, which is technically not true either, but hence kibble must be good. There's no productive conversations around these things, whether this is social media or wherever you go, because people are just it feels good to be right. And everyone is so scared not to be right because they would have to possibly update their worldview. And I think in a chaotic society, that becomes really, really hard because you kind of hold on to the safety of this is what I do and this is the best thing to do.
Mm.
We see it online at the moment, not just in the dog space, it's kind of everywhere with everything. There's a lot of anger, right? And a lot of people are sort of on a hair trigger over many things. But one of the things that kind of upsets me in all of that is you see so many people that are really angry about things that either didn't happen or are totally untrue. And we see that sort of in politics and in the dog space and in everything, in absolutely everything. People losing their fucking minds and sharing memes as though it's a fact, right? It's a picture of somebody with some writing saying that they did a particular thing. And they're like, see, I told you this is the devil, and clearly upset because they've believed it. And 3 seconds on the Google machine will tell you that didn't happen. That's not true. So you're choosing to get upset. And I think that's what we've seen so much in the training space. Like, it's everywhere on social media currently, but that's what I've seen get really pointed at you. I've seen a lot of anger. I've seen a lot of distress pointed at you because you're the opposite side of the lie that they've believed, And I think that it's quite distressing. I've done it. I've had my worldview rocked. I've lived in accordance with something that I thought was a truth, and then it turns out not to be true. And of course, my initial reaction is anger, is contempt, is resent for the person who told me the truth, because you don't want that inconvenient truth to dismantle the lie that was making you so angry to begin with. Mm-hmm. And the answer, unfortunately, we know this from behavior, is, the response to when something works and has worked in the past and it suddenly stops working, the response is to try harder, right? Like, we know that extinction burst. And that's what I've seen happen to you. And we don't often use his name, but I will. I'm quite frank about what I think's happening with Zach George. I'm not afraid to say that I think that he's descending into madness. I think we're watching in real time a man completely unravel and go insane in front of his audience who are egging him on to do it and are enthralled by the show that he's putting on as he descends into madness. A lot of that madness has been pointed at you in a fucking wild way, like wild that he's done those things to the point where I've never had any form of interaction with the guy. But if I were even peripherally friends with him, even a little bit, even if we were frenemies, I would reach out to him and be like, hey, you okay? Because, mate, I think you're circling the drain. You appear to me to be approaching an end point where I think you're going to hurt yourself, somebody else, or a dog. Like, that's the level of madness I'm seeing. But what I'm seeing is him attacking you and people fucking supporting him for doing it. And in the wildest way, like, getting so mad at you for being right.
And you haven't been unfriendly about it either. Like, there's nothing that you've done where I've thought, oh, Melanie's taking a really brutal stance here and being offensive in the message that she's carrying. You've been lovely about how you've been doing it. You've maintained a very professional stance and you're just talking about what you've learned and you're sharing that with people. And that debunking category is just fantastic. Just to further what Pat was saying there, I had this sent to me and I don't follow the guy at all. Like, I don't support any of his outreach anymore at all. But this was sent to me. So I'm not saying that, I'm only going to say this is allegedly from him because somebody screenshotted it and sent it to me from him. It's from his page and it says, yesterday's advocates for child abuse have found a new home. They call themselves Balanced Dog Trainers.
Yeah, I've seen it too, which I came to the same conclusion when I first saw that, and there were some other things before that, but just like what Pat just said, that's when I thought he's lost. Like, something is broken seriously now, and it's beyond, I don't know what's beyond cold, but it's beyond the cold that he's developed. It's insanity. And honestly, it did kind of gives a little bit of room to insert a little bit more sanity that way, and a little bit more, okay, let's look at this from a more, neutral point, because the emotions are so high that it's kind of at some point people are like burn out of that, or must be, except for the really, like, I think even within the force-free community, there are so many now that are upset about that really extreme way of communicating and attacking people and ostracizing anyone who has remotely a different view. That doesn't sit well, even with those who do have a genuine interest in force-free training, let's say, which there is a component of that, right? And he's just taking it to the next level that's not acceptable, I think, for anyone who has a little bit more than one brain cell.
What toll is this having on you, Melanie? How are you coping with all the heat and pressure that Pat was describing before?
It has been an evolution. The very first time when I started to debunk science, right, I'm testing social media. I was like, let's see how this sits. And this is just in my head. Let's share that. And I had no idea that this is going to happen. Like, I had no intention to make this as serious. I was kind of not pushed, but I was like, okay, well, I guess that's something that people want to hear more about or fight about. But I had no intention and no idea that it's going to spiral to the point where people would attack me at such intensity, not just like professionally, but personally and all, that I was like my husband was like, at some point, he was like, you have to be careful that you don't get death threats. I didn't, but it got to a point where, I wouldn't be surprised if that had happened. People reached out from the force-free community saying, like, be careful and collect any evidence where they're threatening you in any way that is unacceptable and beyond the normal social media clutter. And I was like, okay, this is getting serious. It's like, how did that even happen? And like you said, Glenn, I'm going back and I'm like, did I say anything super offensive? Or did I say anything so wrong that it would offend people in that way? But, it's like, okay, I guess not. And I took a step back a little bit. So I had like a bunch of those reels, and I took a step back and posted on some other things. And Zach George, he reached out to me multiple times. He commented, obviously, but he private messaged me, and he wanted to be Facebook friends. And then he messaged me there too. And I kind of got a little bit stalky to the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to block you. And then I was sitting in this for a little bit and I was like, okay. And then the first round, the first heat and waves, it did affect me. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, that was just like whatever, right? Because if you get attacked personally, so much so that people like, you're going to take her PhD away and you can actually revoke someone's PhD. I mean, it's a little ridiculous. And I had to smile a little bit about like the audacity of people think, yeah, you go to Germany and tell those people, what do you think on social media to get my PhD revoked?
Don't gloss over that, because that, I don't have a fucking PhD to take away. But when people say shit like that, that is outrageous to threaten you in that way. Because that's what it is, right? Like that's a threat of like, you better conform or we will take from you the things that you've earned. That's an outrageous position to put somebody in for doing their job. You shouldn't gloss over. That's no minor thing. And now you're probably something of an expert in being attacked online, right? For speaking the truth. I've watched it happen so many times. But the fact that you have developed a bunch of calluses and can handle it well now doesn't diminish how horrific that would have been to feel that. I've got those, you read those things and you're like, oh my God, this person, if this is a sufficiently fucking crazy person who has the time, energy and capacity, they could actually ruin my life. And they can do that totally remotely. And that's what's wild about that social media thing. Like that person could be a chatbot, you don't know, but they could also be a person who from behind the scenes does destroy your life and puts in the work and effort to do that. And you'll never even get to front them. You never even get to find out whether it's a man or a woman. Like you could know that little about the person just from what they are able to do and coalesce behind the scenes. Because if they get the right support in the right places, they absolutely could do that, right? Like if you rallied enough lunatics, it's a possible thing.
For sure. And we're living in the cancel culture, you know, like, and there's nothing you can do. Like you literally just, you wake up one morning and you've been canceled. You know, you've seen it so many times because you just have this bunch of people who just decide this is the way to go. And, you know, the last time where I mentioned that in one of my stories too, the last time where intellectuals were being basically ostracized is fascist behavior. That's fascism 101. When you like take away basically the authority of intellectuals who have studied science and burn their books, forbid their papers being read and all that. That's fascist behavior. And I think that's how it felt like, right? And like what the heck? And then on top of that, speaking of fascism, right? Like people started to be saying like, you're German, you know, you're Nazi and all these kind of things. And that
Holy
kind of
shit.
Yeah, that was, you know, they obviously you do everything you can to attack a person because you have a very emotional driven goal in that sense, which had nothing to do anymore with what I was actually saying, right? They were out to hurt me emotionally, seriously. Because if you ever think about it, I never ever really said I'm pro e-collar. I'm just saying the science that we use to make claims is not valid enough to make these claims. And that is enough to upset people, which then, you know, makes you think like, okay, if you are that upset about something, then there must be another incentive for you to do these things. And it's not anymore just about the dogs.
It's crazy.
There's been plenty of people in history who have been led to the gallows or burned at a stake for having a different opinion. That's the way that people get rid of their opposition, is by eliminating them through, you know, extreme measures and pressures. And myself and many others in our industry have really enjoyed seeing somebody as brave as you sit down and be able to transcribe what you're actually seeing, like the real data, not only on paper, but also in the field, as being a dog owner and trainer and somebody who's actually going out and spending time on the ground. Like I said before, getting mud on your boots and walking around in fields and watching the behavior of dogs, not just selectively, but holistically. Like you're looking at the broad depth of how dogs and dog owners and dog trainers are working with dogs and some of the difficulties of the stimuli that's presented before them. Melanie, I really applaud you and I appreciate you so much because I really feel that that's what's missing in the depth of these arguments that people are putting forward is, yes, they're collecting data and they're spruiking it online, but they're not actually walking in the fields. They're sitting in a chair behind a keyboard. And you know these people are like they're professional warriors because They're online all the time. Like they're never offline. Unless they're walking around with their phone, they're sitting behind a keyboard just shouting down at people because they feel very emotionally wounded and challenged. And they're the very people that would happily stand in a crowd and boo the monster while some innocent person gets their head cut off because they dared speak out against the church or they dare speak out against the government when these tyrants and dictators are like literally having their way with them. This is certainly encouragement from me or from us to say, don't stop. Don't let these people silence you because you've got a beautiful voice and you're using it so well. And it's not just that you're on our side. I don't want to be on the wrong side. I want to know the truth. I don't want to be limited from the truth because people want to silence people like you because you want to read data that's real and uncover the facts behind it. So another big thank you and a lot of love and appreciation.
Really do appreciate it and kind of like that support, whether this is coming out on podcasts where obviously a lot of people can hear it or sending me an email, like the bunch of messages that I get that say that regardless of whether they're vets or, other scientists and whatnot, is very encouraging. And I do have to say though, there was some, I don't really remember if there was a moment or something that someone said, but in the last, must have been like 4 months or something. It's like I came back to the idea of like, okay, there's so much cool data out there. How can we take the nuggets and help our dogs? But I came back to like, I cannot not talk about this. It's just, that just happens to be me too, that I really enjoy these things. And, knowing that the shitstorm will come, something happened. I'm like, fuck that. Like, fuck everyone who wants to attack me. I'm going to attack back. And I think I made some statements. And then even that, people are like, what happened to you? I'm like, no, nothing happened to me. Nothing ever happened to me. Nothing will happen to me. And I will certainly not let anyone who thinks they have science all figured out attack me. Like, who the fuck do you think you are? So, and then at first I was like, okay, I'm just going to be not responding to it and just, let them hash it out in the comment section and just keep doing. But at some point, like, no, that does clearly A, doesn't work. And B, I think it's time I need to put these people into place. You come on my account to start a war, well, then you better brace yourself because I'm going to make it public now, not just what you comment. That's why I changed my format of showing the comments and then giving a detailed response to what they think is right and what I think is a much better answer to that. And surprisingly, now that I'm ready to fight back, surprisingly, all these attacks have kind of slowed down, and our Zach George friend has also stopped commenting on things. But basically, what I'm saying here is like, now I'm looking at this as like, literally come at me with whatever you have, because whatever you have is most likely going to be very, very shallow. And not that I want to put everyone down or like want to make anyone feel stupid. And if you really watch my commenting in this, is if anyone has in a respectful way a question, may it be from the balanced or the force-free world, I will respond respectfully and, answer as much as I can. If someone comes at me personally, I will, in a professional way, let's say that, let that person know that that was A, not okay, and B, stupid. So that's basically my approach. And I think I will continue doing that, but also doing the other things that I'm interested in.
Good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. You said before, Melanie, that Zach had reached out to you personally, which I find contradictory to a lot of the rules that he usually engages people by, because he won't engage in other people who want to have dialogue with him. Did you actually engage with him? Did you actually have a conversation, or did it just never go anywhere from there?
No, I didn't have a conversation with him because I know he just, the way, and this is not just Zach George, there are other people who reach out and like, can you tell me your stance on, and it's usually the phrasing that already says it, using shock collars or using pain and fear in dog training, right? If anyone asks a question like that, I already know they're trying to trap me by me saying something and then using that to say, here, see, she's using pain and fear in dog training. So I'm not, anyone who comes with a question like this, I already know this person is not here to actually have a conversation. So
yeah, well, it's a very loaded question to come at anybody with.
No matter what I say, it's a lose for me and the win for the other person. because we're loading it up with so many emotions, which, well, see, this is where it gets complicated, right? Like, what do you even say to these? Like, no, I'm not using fear and pain, but then the e-collar, and then I heard my dog yelp and what, and it's like, you're telling me the dog was not in pain, and then you have to say, well, I don't know, it could have just been startled. We don't know much about pain, but my dog is then in avoidance, and if it's not fear, it's like, well, maybe you weren't clear enough, but your dog will actually go into avoidance, and then there's dopamine, and there's a reward, but then it's not the same as relief and reward, and it goes on and on and on, because people just don't want to get to the point where they understand the dog's behavior. In the meantime, you create this incomplete learning. And I think that has been, for me, from a scientific and intellectual perspective, something I've been really curious about, the idea of complete learning. Like, unless you know, or you can know what to do, what is wanted to do all day long, right? And it's like a dog and a trainer and maybe force-free only rewards. Like, I want you to do this. And you have a highly motivated dog for food, crazy for dog, maybe for toys, right? We all have these dogs. And I can tell my puppy Ollie all day long, do this, do this, do this, do this, happily engaging all the time, right? And maybe never getting into trouble. I've been so good with management and always observing not to chase anything for the rest of his life. I still think something has been missing for my dog, understanding and putting everything into context. Meaning, if always two things happen, I think, always directed you to the behavior I want. So by default, my dog has never given a choice to be who he wants to be. Because maybe, because I'm so obsessed him not going after a squirrel, that I get him to play. Maybe he just wanted to walk along. Maybe he wanted to dig a hole. Maybe he wanted to sniff the 500 other pee spots in the park. I don't know, because I never let my dog have other choices, because I have to be very obsessed with just directing to the behavior I want that I have control over, which is not the case if in a true avoidance and punishment fashion is don't do this, but you can do everything else you want. And then the true learning about the dog, I think, comes in and observing. It's like, oh, my dog prefers doing these kind of things. And then functional rewards come in. But you'd never get to that point if you never let your dog make a mistake. And your dog, the brain, will never be able to contextualize things as in, I can do this, but I can do that, which in return gives so much agency over, I know what to do with myself and not do with myself, versus I'm always directed to something, right? And I think there is a lot to say about this incomplete learning if a dog never gets the chance to work through comfort, of true avoidance, having a choice of doing everything else. And then, of course, reward strategies, right? They all kind of work together. And just focusing on one, like this, why punishment if rewards work, is such a common argument, and they're just not the same. Like they're completely different. There is no rewarding instead of punishing, or punishing instead of rewarding. I mean, there are like some gray areas and stuff, but when it comes to like the true behaviors that we're creating in dogs, there really is not, they're not very interchangeable in terms of the mindset we are creating. And I would argue a dog that knows what to avoid goes even more so for what the dog wants, given the choices, has a much better understanding and a much better confidence than a dog who's constantly having to seek for cues in terms of only rewards. And yes, they're seemingly happy, but are they, like, I don't know. I feel like there's just, it would be something missing in the dog's understanding of the world.
Yeah, for sure. They're not, like you see that all the time. The dogs are, they're not complete. And it often leads to what we would observe as anxiety, where the dog's like, I'm not done. I don't know how to be. I need you to tell me how to be. Therefore, in your absence, or if you're not paying attention to me, I don't know how to be. I'm lost and alone in the dark. I need something to hang on to. I need you to tell me what to do. I need you to present the toy so that I can play, because I have all this venom inside of me and I have not been taught how to manage that myself. And with those kind of dogs, in the absence of the handler, they absolutely fall apart, and then they're a mess. And then we get the people that then can't be apart from their dog, and it destroys their life. And then they're in this whole cycle, and then they've got nothing better to do but argue with you online. I think something I wanted to sort of probably say his name for the last time, but only because it feeds into what I want to ask you. in all of his interactions I see with people online, I think that I find Zach George to be quite disingenuous, because I think that he's descending into madness, yes, but I don't think he even believes what he says. I think that he just says whatever the topical thing is at the time. And I think that what it appears to me that he's attempted to do with a few people in the balanced community, and certainly those of stature, is tried to make a frenemy. And I think that he is, for the social media game, looking for somebody to have a public back and forth with probably some like back channels between each other, orchestrating that, like it's a puppet show where he wants that. Because I know a thing or two about social media, and it's not hard to look at his numbers and see that there was a time when he was an early person to social media and was able to get really high numbers with a very low skill set. His social media production is certainly adequate. Like, it's as good as a YouTuber needs to be, but his skill set as a trainer is very, very low, equal to the average pet dog owner, I would say. And so now in the social media space, you've got so many people like yourself who have this incredible skill set, but also the barrier to entry to being successful on social media, like production quality, it's not hard, right? Like, you can learn that shit in a weekend and then be as good a production quality as the best. As I'm constantly telling people that ask me about getting into like equipment and stuff like that, I say, unless you're prepared to spend $15,000 on a camera, your phone does the same thing. When people ask me about what camera I should get, I'm like, unless you're prepared to spend 15 grand, your phone cannot outperform anything. Your phone will outperform everything up to 15 grand. Everybody's able to make this incredible content. And so his content now, the only thing that allows it to sell is arguments, right? Like, that's the only way that he can continue to get the views that he needs to pay the bills. Like, that's the reality. He needs to pay his bills. And so it seems to me that there's a lot of fake arguments, and it's a show because he says something, he needs someone else to say something, and we can have this back and forth. And I think that's evident by the way he does a lot of replies to what other people put out on his own platform. So rather than engaging directly with you on your platform, all those views go to you. You do what you have to do, and then I'll reply on mine, and you need to observe it and send your audience to me, and they'll observe mine. And then you reply, and I'll send, like, he's a player. He shares. He's like, I will point my audience at you and you get your turn. The algorithm gets to capture all that data and know that these are people interested, and you can retarget them and you can try and sell them to your courses. Like, whatever, you got to make your money, but I need you to send them back to me. Right. And then send some of your audience to me. Even if they come over and hate me and call me all the names that they'll call me, that's fine. So long as while they're typing their hateful comment, the reel is playing in the background and the algorithm sees that and plays to that. So I think that's his game. I think that you would have to, at this point, if you don't understand that, you'd have to be a legitimate moron to not see that's what he's doing. So that's the last time I really want to talk about him. In that all happening, what I'm curious to know is, as some of his audience or others were pointed at you, how many DMs did you get saying, thank you so much, you've changed the way that I think about things. I've reluctantly brought in some of the strategies you say, and my dog is fixed now. And then they've probably said to you, and also, like, I was 3 years with this fucking trainer who's taken $20,000 off of me and achieved nothing. And the strategy I learned in a 30-second reel from you has completely changed my dog's life. Tell me about a few of those.
I don't know if they've ever been that extreme in terms of the dog is fixed, but it definitely goes along those lines, as at the very minimum, kind of like, like the majority of DMs and emails that I get are people saying things make more sense now to them, meaning they know now how to look at the things that they may be already doing in a better way and fine tune it, or feel less scared about, for example, using aversive control, or feel less worried that they're going to ruin their dogs, or just kind of like feel more grounded in reality, even though it's being pulled in like science, because the whole drama they're not necessarily subscribing to. That's the majority. And then we have a bunch of others that have flipped, basically, from, I'm force-free, and they're basically saying, I have this inner conflict between, it doesn't seem right because I've been fed this ever since I started being a dog trainer or having a dog. And now you telling me that it's okay to use aversive control. Not only okay, it's necessary, not only necessary, it's beneficial. I mean, like that is like very hard to process if you've been told it's going to ruin your dog. No, it's beneficial to the dog's welfare. And a lot of them are saying kind of like, I'm still digesting, but I'm not believing anymore that everything is harmful. I'm just want to learn more now. And like it triggered. Then there are a bunch of people who say, you inspired me to do a PhD or go to school for this, which I usually say, don't. Don't do that. Which is, I appreciate it because they want to kind of, mimic the path and they want to kind of have that scientific knowledge. But, again, you can get a lot of it already free online and then just go out and observe trainers. At the very beginning, when I started out training dogs and my own dog, I did buy Zach George's books. So no one can ever say that I'm only like involved in the balanced world. I'm like, I was curious. It's like, let's see what this guy has to say. It was even before I was aware if there was ever such time. I can't even believe that there was such peaceful time where I was not aware of this divide. It was like, what do you mean balanced? What's balanced? What's force free? And I was like, okay, this guy pops up, because obviously he has the numbers. And I bought his books and it sounded good. And he had like nice pictures. It's all pictures about like, I don't know, recall and heal. And I'm like, I'm doing this with my dog. And I'm like, that shit just doesn't work. And he's the cutest dog. Like he's the cutest puppy of 5 months. He has no problems. And yet that shit doesn't work. So that's where I kind of almost, not to say that it started with Zach George, but there were other trainers that I at the same time learned from. And then I shut on anyway. So what I'm saying is that's the way to go. You kind of need to be open and learn from everyone. Like take trainers that not necessarily have your point of view, but are still some sort of like reasonable in their approach, right? And there are plenty of them. And so there are a bunch of those that say, like I want to study and like study the dogs and learn everything else, online courses, that's enough, right? You don't have to be a neuroscientist necessarily. And then there are others where they're basically angry for me, just like what we discussed, right? They're saying like, I'm going out and beat everyone up. Just let me know who. I'm going to like punch face all day long if I have to, right? Which is also very sweet. And I appreciate that. And some of my followers, they can get very mean in the comments too, because it starts out to be a fight. And I don't necessarily support that. But like, hell yeah, these are my followers. Of course, I'm not going to like tell them, stop that. They're still my supporters. And if you're nasty, then, obviously I have people behind me that are starting to be nasty too. Do I completely support, being really nasty with each other? No, I don't. But, at the end of the day, that's also the game of social media, right? Like you just described what Zach George is doing. So, and then there is a minority of those, but still they're happening. Are like the silent professionals, not dog trainers, but the silent professionals of fields like veterinary fields and other scientists that silently express their support, but they can't do it publicly because they know that within their fields, they're not ready to take the heat. I mean, so the veterinarians that I have probably 10 at least that have reached out and said like, personally with my dogs, I do use aversive controls. I learn from you, I learn from others. I would never ever say that out loud with my colleagues because I will get ostracized and it's going to be hell at work. That's really sad that this happens, but it happens.
It's terrible. And it's such a misleading lie that people are silenced and felt to be pushed into a narrative where they're now afraid to speak the truth because they'll get hunted down and ostracized. There was a while back where I was watching some of your reels that you put out, and when you were talking through some of the sciences and you were relaying to people that the biology of the brain is hardwired to understand both reinforcement and punishment, and it thrives in both areas because that's how it finds equilibrium in understanding how to navigate the world through both those means. Like I applauded that. I thought that is a wonderful explanation to really put it to people that it's not only how your dog works, but it's also how you work as well. Like you need that act of kindness sometimes in the shaping of behaviors to reinforce the things that your environment finds productive and supportive, and also to punish those that it doesn't. And we've acknowledged this before. We've both, Pat and I have said on the podcast, we find it an act of kindness when you actually punish a behavior and the entity gets to learn from it very quickly and go, oh, okay, so I'm not allowed to do this anymore. That's just the way it is. I found the same thing with my chickens the other day. I've got chickens now. They're all running onto the front doorstep where we've got a porch set up and they're shitting all over it. You can't stop chickens from doing those things. They're very curious. They want to be around you, and when they want to be in an area, they just go there. So now what I do is I go out there and I get the hose and I squirt them. So they find that quite aversive and they all get off the porch. So all I have to do now, if I see them, I just walk towards the hose and they all just vanish. They're off the porch to the point now where they're very infrequently on there. Now, people might say to me, oh, you're using aversives on chickens? How cruel. It's just water. Like when it rains, they get the same issue and, then they find shelter because they feel the pressure of the rain. They don't want to be in it. They go and find shelter, which any normal entity would do. And it's exactly the same sort of punishment I'm using. My point being, correct me if I'm wrong, Melanie, but my point being is I think where people have taken this horrible argument so wrong is they've made an hysteria out of punishment where really they're talking about the realm of abuse. And that's where I see so many people taking this argument or this discussion. Let's not call it an argument, but it's a discussion where they take it so wrong because they're thinking of anything in terms of the word punishment, where people are now changing the word to sound more appropriate to the public because now they don't want to say the word punishment because all of the people who are focusing on punishment should be focused on abuse. Mm-hmm. But they're also labeling punishment as abuse because they can't get it out of their head that the two are different entities.
Yeah, you nailed it. And there goes even more into it with abuse. What they really mean is fear, right? Like, again, like whenever you say something, are you using pain and fear? And that's abuse, right? And then they come with the argument that in the welfare framework, an animal should be free of pain and free of like suffering and all that things.
But isn't some fears healthy? Sorry to interrupt. Isn't some fears healthy? Like, isn't it healthy to have some fears of things? Wouldn't that keep you safe and keep you thriving?
I'm going to borrow this word from Dr. Stuart Hilliard, how he describes it as apprehension. Because fear, I think that's the interesting part is, what is actually fear? Like scientists are not sure what fear actually is. I don't know why we feel so entitled to think that we understand exactly what fear is in an animal, because it might not be at all the way we feel about it. Because when we hear fear, we think of being scared. But there's no animal that is scared of fear. What happens when we talk about anxiety is when everything becomes very unpredictable, right? When learning has no sense in an animal's brain, it makes no sense. But that's not what dog training is, right? That's what abuse is, right? That's where things come in that have all these fallouts. But punishment as a technique and apprehension and threat detection and therefore avoidance learning as a technique is very, very different than what we think of being scared and fearful of. And I'm avoiding it because I'm so scared I'm going to get shocked. And I hesitate giving that example because I know people will say, well, but these are dogs that live in our living room. But if you think about the Amazon and all the animals living in the Amazon, it's basically a death march there. You can die any second. If you're not careful, you're going to die. Someone is going to eat you unless you're an apex predator, right? But most of the time, even for them though, right? Because there's another apex predator that might want to eat it. So you have to be vigilant at all times. Now, according to what they're going to expect a punishment as in like potential death at all times, all the animals in the Amazon, according to that logic, would have to be on anxiety medication because they can't handle themselves, right? Because they're anxious that they're going to be, they're not. Yes, they're going to die. They don't live as long because it's such a high intense, environment, but their brain is very much prepared to handle that. And they still enjoy their life as they can, and they still avoid threats as they can. And yes, our dogs, they live in our living rooms. The brain, though, is not that much different when it comes to threat detection, avoiding, and seeking. It's actually it's the brainstem. Like as the name says, it's such a conserved brain area. the thing that differs are like very species specific, but it's negligible compared to what is actually still happening. So we are all prepared to avoid with clarity, to learn from it and adapt. And none of these animals are scared of fear. If you talk about fear as in like avoidance learning, or scared of like, oh my God, I'm scared of stepping outside the house because something might be happening. It's like, that's not, the brain is way too complex and way too prepared to handle these things. But we are putting ourselves in like a comfort crisis and drag our dogs with us by saying, we're going to protect you from anything that might be potentially a threat, that dogs lose the ability to handle it because they're never being exposed to it, right? Like a muscle that you don't flex and never practice, even though they're perfectly equipped to handle all that. And we humans as handlers, we certainly have the cognitive capabilities of being clear and communicate well if we want to. You know, how people always say, it's so complex and you better get your timing 100% right, or else your dog will be anxious forever and aggressive. Like, you get it wrong, 100, not 100, like there will be a time where you get your timing wrong and the dog still will be fine. Happens to all of us. You might get it wrong twice, 3 times, maybe 10 times over the course. Well, after that, you should really work on your timing. But if you can get your timing right with reinforcement, there is no reason, it makes no sense to me. Why would you not get your timing right with punishment?
Exactly.
You just don't want to learn it. But we are, at the end of the day, still the most intelligent species. And people tell me that dog owners or dog trainers can learn it. That's fake news. That's not happening. What you're really saying is you don't want to because you don't prefer it. But don't say that people have not the capacity to learn that stuff.
Nicely said.
Some time ago, someone posted, I think it was in our group, Glenn, someone posted a problem they were having with their dog, saying any ideas on how to fix this or how to stop my dog doing this or why my dog's doing it. And there was a comment and it just said, have you tried telling him not to? And it was actually Casey that made the comment. And so like I've stolen that a few times, right? And I've used that and it's got me kicked out of groups. It's got me like into quite a lot of trouble when people say, hey, I've got this real issue with my dog. This is what the dog is doing. How do I get the dog to stop? And so often, like it kind of blew my mind when I read that comment. And I was like that, because like that's a legitimate, we're often like, okay, well, like there's this peculiar strategy and, you know, like you can work reinforcement and distance and duration. But like, have you tried telling the dog don't do that? Because like dogs are pretty malleable. And like if you've got a decent relationship and if everything else is going really well with this dog, you can just go, hey, fucking knock that off. And the dog is likely to go, oh, righto. Wasn't aware this was a problem because I was having a good time doing it. Was not worried about your experience while my experience was awesome. But now you've told me not to and made it a little bit aversive, like, okie doke, got it. And I think there's so many examples like that of these really stressful and sometimes really overly complicated and unnecessary, drawn out training plans and all these sorts of things. And one of the things that sort of really grinds my gears, the like gradual exposure to the trigger, you know, like, so it's like for sure, sometimes counter condition, that's, it's got to go that way, right? Like for sure. But sometimes if a dog's got an issue with something and you're trying to slowly fix that issue, what you're doing is constantly reminding that dog of its issue over and over a long period of time. And surely, like, this is one of the things that sort of blows my mind is that people can't see the long, low-level stress is way worse for you and like a way worse experience to live in than just like one decently stressful moment. Like, let's triple the amount of stress you put me through for a good 10 seconds, right? Rather than keep it like, no, let's keep it really low level, just like a simmering concern and anxiety for 12 years. Let's keep it like that. Right? Like I just can't put those things together. But I think that's that when we talk about punishment and the life that the dog can lead, that's the question I keep finding myself saying to people, like, or asking them, like, have you tried telling him not to do that? Any effect there?
Any insights?
Any insights? What did he say? Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, no worries. All right, and carry on with our awesome lives. Good day. Righto.
let me preface it with the study that has been done by Dr. Clive Wynne. He has surveyed dog owners, but the way he has surveyed them was trying to understand how well they can understand their dogs. And what he's taken basically pictures of dogs, and then, AI, you can cut out the silhouette. So it's just a picture of the dog in a certain body position, but without the context, meaning without knowing the dog is hovering over a bowl or, wagging the tail, looking up the owner. So you don't see all that. You just see the picture of the dog. And maybe not surprisingly, but overwhelmingly, dog owners had no idea what their dog was actually communicating. Meaning they said one thing, but it was actually the opposite once they realized with the context, it was actually not that. And I don't know if I would be doing much better because context is so important. But because context is so important, we then sometimes get hung up so much on, oh my God, there was like a tail wag that was a little bit too stiff, then the loose tail wagging, which means now my dog is on alert and I got a whale side eye. Now my dog is stressed and I have to remove my dog immediately from that stressful situation. And the dog always just like, I was looking at you from the side. Like, it happens too, right?
The lip lick is my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
That's like, oh my God, he licked his lips. We have to stop immediately. Like, okay, but we are playing with a ball that's covered in dirt. And like, he does have dirt all over his mouth and tongue. And maybe he was just cleaning that up. That's a good possibility.
Or he's
maybe
been running and he's got saliva all over his mouth.
Yeah.
He's just cleaning himself up like a proper grooming scenario would be.
Or he's anticipating getting his marker. And that caused that's the level of stress that caused the lip lick. Like, for sure. I mean, you have a look, you go to any dog sport competition, watch every dog in the long down. The moment that the handler turns around, comes back, they all lick their lips. Like, I've watched it a million fucking times. Almost every dog does it, of like, oh my God, here he comes. Like, that's all that it indicates.
But now someone would say, well, that means the owner who uses aversive control is coming closer to the dog, and now the dog is anticipating all the punishment and is already lip licking, right?
Yeah.
People would be like, yep, for sure. Without context, you can make these kind of claims, right? And even, let's just, in the context of training, let's just say the dog is stressed and communicating with lip licks. Instead of saying, holy shit, my dog is about to fall apart, crumble like a cookie, and I got to remove the dog. It's like, can we just take it in at information and saying, okay, I keep an eye on it. A little bit of stress is good. Let's work through that and then recover together. Like, in what world is that not a possibility? Like, why this constant like removing as soon as there is some stress? It's kind of like, and I've been keep saying that too. Like, in order to be resilient, like, there has to be stress to be resilient for. Like, how can you be resilient if there is never stress that you should be resilient for? And then they're like, well, I can create this resiliency with rewards. I'm like, how? And it's something that I've been doing on my content. It's like, if you actually ask specific questions, oftentimes I don't get a response anymore. Or it turns out it stays very shallow. Like, tell me how you can become resilient with rewards. Like, seriously. And then they're like, well, in terms of, I don't know. I don't even know. When I want to touch my dog, I can give some toy or something to chew on, and then my dog will work through that. It's like, you're just masking what's happening. And it's a good management strategy. And, in certain situations, I would use that too. I put a toy in front of my dog. My dog is like this and doesn't care that I'm touching him. And, the dopamine box, I think, is a good example for that too. And you can play with that and gradually change the awareness the dog has of the discomfort that the dog experiences. But at the end of the day, the dog has to be aware of some level of discomfort in order to be resilient to discomfort. There is no need to be resilient to a toy. Like, that there is motivation and then there is resiliency, and we kind of mix that up. And one is good in certain situations to mask this if you have to get through the situation. But in other ways, sometimes the dog has to sit in the stress. And the dog, more often than not, will be completely fine unless you overdo it. But everyone who has a little bit of understanding of the dog in front of them won't overdo it. It's okay to be a little uncomfortable, and it's okay to see your dog struggle for a moment. And it's hard for people to see their dogs struggle because we then imply how that feels for us when we struggle and feel helpless, right? But instead of then removing the dog and having the dog linger in that, oh, that was shit, I'm glad I'm out of here. What the dog needs is like the owner stay calm. It's like, hey, buddy, I'm helping you through this. It sucks right now and you're kind of really resisting the leash pressure. But if you yield to the leash and we do this one more time, then you're good. And we actually end the session with like a high note. And that learning is different than removing every dog prematurely from stress. And of course, there are like all these exemptions, right, here and there. But overall, we have this crisis of creating comfort at all costs that our dogs forget, not even forget, they never get a chance to learn how to work through stress. And then the argument is, well, life throws so much stress at you already. Yes. Don't you want your dog to be prepared? Like, how can you be prepared if you never get your dog to learn how to be prepared, you know? And that kind of just snowballs into this whole idea of pain and fear needs to be avoided. And what everyone is so afraid of fear. Like, no, there is no being scared of fear in the animal kingdom. That's us, our emotions that we kind of let govern how we handle our dogs at times. And you know, like I'm not here zippy zappy my dog around and like, ha ha ha, this is fun. You know, I don't personally like it either, but I understand the technicality of it and understand the benefits of it. And I stay as neutral as possible to the whole process because I trust the process and I see the results and I see the outcome of it. I mean, and I need help at times and I go to trainers that I trust to help me with that. But I'm not here and then kind of demonizing anything because I'm uncomfortable with that myself. So that was a long rant, and I don't even know what the original question was anymore. But I think it kind of all kind of feeds into each other.
You've made so many good points. Like I always love listening to what you're putting down. But just thinking on one of the points that you made before, do you think that people are mirroring their own feelings and projecting it onto the dogs, and that's where a big portion of these issues are coming from?
I was about to ask the exact same thing, mate.
Cool. Well done.
100%. I mean, how can we not? And you can't blame humans for doing so. I mean, that's in a way our superpower, right? Like how we empathize, and that creates all these relationships where we take it to the next level. Because the answer to I don't understand something is I imply what I feel myself, and emotions and feelings they're not the same. We don't know much about how animals feel. We don't. There's no way of measuring it. We don't know how to measure pain either. It is so subjective that we can't observe the emotion. We can't observe their behavior, and we have to be careful what emotions we attach to that. And if we were just a little bit more, what's the right word? I don't know if neutrals is the right word, but I think that's where trusting professionals that don't have this narrative of fear and, we don't want fear and your dog is, sometimes the dog is excited and happy, but we don't know how they actually feel excited and happy. I think some dogs that are constantly excited, they're probably more anxious. I think they're not really happy either because they can just never settle. And we think, oh yeah, it's like my happy dog because that's what we want for ourselves, right? I don't know how we get out of this because it's very hard for us to not to. I mean, I train my dog. I'm kind of like almost a different person. I kind of put my trainer hat on and I'm just really German. But when I'm not training my dogs, now I'm like putting all kinds of interpretations on my dogs. Right? It's like, oh, he's doing this and she's doing that, and then he's like, all kinds of adjectives that we use. But I'm really aware that I cannot do this when I'm actually training because it has less of a insight there. But we do that all the time. And it works because we like to be very feely, touchy in that way, and because we get dogs for that reason.
I think the best experiences that I have, I'm going to remove dogs here and just talk about people. The best experiences that I have with people is when I know what the parameters are, like what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do. Then I feel most comfortable in their presence. It's when I feel like I'm constantly guessing where is the boundary here. And then when you hit it, you get in trouble for it and you think, well, I didn't even know that that was a problem. I didn't even know that you were going to be annoyed about that or that was going to create an issue between us. But when I'm working with somebody and they say, hey, mate, here's some quirks about me, certain things that I do and don't like, and I think, oh, cool, then I know how to behave around this type of person. And I like my dogs to feel like that as well, like to know where the rough boundaries are, then we can shape it in from there. They get a lot of liberties and they're allowed to do things, but there's also things that are out of bounds and they're not allowed to do. So I try and remove as much of that anxiety as we were pointing out before, where they're thinking, do I have to step on eggshells around this guy today? Like, what am I going to get in trouble for that I don't know about? Because that's the message that's conveyed when I'm in your presence. And I really can't stand that about general people that I'm with, is that I don't know if today is an eggshell day or today is a day of liberties. Like, what is it? I'd rather them just say, oh, look, I'm a bit hungover or I'm a bit cranky today. Don't mind me. I'm just being a pain in the ass. And I think, yeah, cool. That's great. Thanks for giving me a bit of a heads up in that area.
One thing I just wanted to sort of point out is I think sometimes people have a hard time understanding the personality of an animal that is so far away from their own.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why, like, I thrive under stress. The normal world to me can be very uncomfortable. When I was at school, I was the kid that would finish the assignment on the bus on the way to school the day it was due.
Oh my God. No, I'm not like that. I was the one who was finished 3 months earlier.
Yeah. You know, when I was a kid, I had like quite a lot of stress about that myself, and I didn't like it about myself. And I thought I was a bit of a piece of shit because you get told that, right? Like, you're leaving it to the last minute. And it turns out when I decide I'm going to join the army and my psych screening tells them that I'm going straight to special forces because I fucking thrive under stress. You know what I mean? And so it was a really difficult thing for me to rationalize, and I didn't understand it. And what I know is, like, if I'd done that assignment 3 months earlier and chipped away at it, it would not have been as good a product as the one that I make on the bus on the way to school, because I work best under stress. And I think that alone, and there's so many different personality facets that correlate to dogs, but I think that can be a really difficult thing for people to understand, is like, some dogs, they need that pressure. They need things to be hard. And they are going to make it like that, whether you give them those opportunities, whether you give them the opportunity. Now, we're not looking to overload dogs. We're not looking to crush them. But there are some dogs that are like, hey, I'm going to overcome some struggles today. And that you can make those struggles for me, or I can tear the fucking door off when you leave, right? And I think that can be a really difficult thing for people who don't have any oomph behind them to rationalize. I think that people who don't have a lot of drive and don't know what it is to feel stress and never be crushed by it, to be like, no, watch this, right? And there are so many dogs who are that. And I'm drawn to those dogs. And fortunately, I work with that breed, you know, the breed that holds those kinds of traits the most. And I never want I need them to feel that way. I need them to. If you're going to blast through a barricade and search through a building and search for someone and then ultimately fight them, you better fucking enjoy stress, right? Like, you better want to go through some stuff, or else you're not going to be able to do that. And so I think that's one of the interesting things. And I think that some of the people who probably are arguing with you, they just can't feel that. Like, it's just not who they are. They just don't have that, which is fine, whatever, right? Stick to the fluffy dogs. Stick to the dogs that don't need that, right? But every now and again,
they do. They're
like,
gravitated towards that dog, and they don't know any different. Their experience is, they don't have any experience in that realm.
That's right. So, like, there's so many dogs that, you know, that I've raised, or dogs that are in my life. When I see these sort of arguments, I'm like, hey, come and take this dog for a day. I fucking dare you, right? Like, and if you survive the day, the way that doing things the way you're, and these are not aggressive dogs. These are just off tap lunatics that are up for a good time at all times, right? Like, if you get through the day, bring that dog back to me and you can teach me about what you did, right? Because I'm interested in hearing it, because I don't know how the fuck you would manage a dog like that without giving it something to smash through, because it's going to smash through something, whether you give it to it or not.
FYI, for the people who are listening at home, that never happens. Like, those people never take up those challenges. And if they do take on a challenge dog, it's usually a 6-month project, and all the setbacks are never reported. Only the victories are shown online, and the rest of the stuff is hidden from public consumption.
Man, I would love to. So like me and my sort of business partner in this venture, Jazz, we raised dogs together to sell. And the last set of dogs that we had, there was one dog, he's ended up going to a special forces unit and it was like he was built in a lab for me, right? Like he is my dream dog. It was a very reluctant sale. I really wanted to keep him, but I have nowhere for him. You can't keep them all. But he was built in a lab for me. The dog is a funzo, super enjoyable dog, loves a good time, has no hard feelings towards anyone, just likes to fight and to bite and to do hard things. Of course, there were times of aversive control on this dog, right? Like without a doubt, because he has to be handleable, right? And he's gone to service in a special forces unit and will be an incredible dog for them. They're the kind of dogs I think of. He would be tortured in a normal life. Like it would be torture to that dog. And if he ended up in the hands of somebody who wasn't able to show him boundaries, his life would be total management and he would be a pressure gauge that is always at the top, right? You would never get the chance to actually blow that valve off and actually express himself in the way that he needs to, because like most of the time people who don't want any sort of aversive control, not really into the idea of letting dogs bite people either.
Well, the sad fact is those dogs don't make it. They don't get past two.
Totally. He'd be a euthanasia. But I think that's true of my dog. That's probably true of all three of us talking. If our dogs ended up in a kennel, like if our dogs got away from us and ended up at a pound or whatever and was run by the way most of they're euthanasia cases. They're at the minimum, they're heavy medication or euthanasia cases, because these are dogs that like to do stuff. And when you put them in a 4x6 kennel and don't let them do stuff, they don't handle that real well. And that becomes a big problem. And all you got to do is let them do something, right? I've been to so many people's houses where I'm like, oh no, like they've got this disaster dog. And you're like, no, this dog's awesome. He's got to do some training. And they're like, okay, what kind of training? You're like, doesn't matter. You can fucking do anything you want. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. What are you into? What are you into? You want to do something, nose works, bite work, fucking tracking, whatever. Doesn't matter. This dog needs to do something and he just can't be on that couch. He can be on that couch 22 hours a day. But those other 2 hours, he needs to be really doing some shit. That's it. That's all we need to do. Oh, okay. What should I do? Doesn't matter. Fucking anything. Doesn't matter. What method should I use? Doesn't matter. As long as you do something, be fine.
Yeah. I think that all goes into the narrative of like what the dogs, for one, they are certainly animals. No? And then there are some dogs that are a little bit more animal than the cuddly couch potato, which, is like, obviously we have such a variety in dogs, and understanding how a dog is driven. And sometimes, everyone who raises Malinois puppies, or any kind of like that specific breed, knows how they are wired, becomes very obvious very early on. And unless you can foster that in a way that is productive to the handler and satisfying to the dog, you will create a problem. And it has nothing to do with something is wrong with this dog. You know how many times I hear something is wrong with this dog's brain, and we're going to trying to find a specialist to see if there's something, because the dog is just so aggressive. Like, no, this dog just really wants to bite. And all the dog gets is a frozen Kong. That's not going to cut it for this dog. This dog is miserable. And the idea of like a biting dog for like a pet dog owner is horrifying, right? It just does not make sense. And to the point where people say we should stop breeding dogs that want to do this. And like, I mean, you can, but that's a disservice to the species dog. There are plenty of dogs who don't want to bite, like,
Get one of them.
Yeah, we can't demonize the ones that do. And I see this with my, like what I was saying at the beginning, I learned so much. Like I see this with my puppy. We started a little bit of bite work from the very beginning, but I see him and I see his siblings, some of them, and they're super sporty in the bite work, and it's like play for them. They're enjoying it and they're going to be great in sport. And then Ollie, my puppy, comes and he's like, there's no play. There's no fun. This is no games here. He's in it to fight, and he means it. He's fucking serious at 4 months old, to the point where, Michael has already 2 layers on and bitten bloody through the sleeves because he's fighting. He is not there to have a good time. He wants well, it's a good time for him, but it's not playful. And it's like, I'm chasing the toy. And it's like, no, he's been like this from very early on, and he will be like that, and he will be a lot. And I can't wait go through the journey with him, but he's going to be a lot and he's going to be very, very serious about it. Now imagine this dog, because the movie Dog came out and everyone wants a Malinois at home. Imagine this dog at home with a kid. Ollie will not make it through the first year of his life. He will be euthanized because he will be labeled aggressive. When actually, in someone else's hands, this is great genes.
Yeah.
This is perfect.
This is like winning the lottery.
this is like, yeah, exactly. Like, how is that possible, right? Like the same dog, from one person saying this needs to be euthanized and another person saying this is like a genetic lottery win. You will never get that. Clearly that's not a dog problem. That's a problem of how we understand what a dog really means, plus the species behind that. And unless we shift the conversation from, oh my God, all these police and military dogs, they're aggressive and they're born to be, and it must be so miserable to them, to kind of really understanding what it means to be a certain type of dog and empathize with what they want, and that it's not the cuddles. It's surely also the cuddles, but sometimes they just want to do violent things. And violence has been a running theme in human history. Like, look at sports, look at boxing. We love violence if it's put into the right context. We don't condemn these kind of sports, right? We actually enjoy them. So why can we acknowledge the same for dogs who do like that, and not say, oh, they shouldn't be aggressive, they shouldn't be violent? It's not, no, they should. They will one way or another. And it's up to us to create that context that is productive to them. And for other dogs, it's running. And then there are other dogs who kind of want to dig holes or dig something out of something, right? But just stop putting this framework of this is the perfect dog. There's just one picture of a perfect dog, which means a good citizen, always in his sit, and the perfect heel, and always knows how to behave, right? Because I think that's a much bigger threat to the dog's welfare than letting a dog bite and having some aversive experience.
That's what scares me, is that's kind of feels like what the zeitgeist is pushing for, is just this flaccid, pathetic dog that I don't want. Like I can appreciate from afar, and like I'm happy if other people want them, but I don't want that. I don't want a little dog that does nothing and just follows me around pathetically. When I'm old, I want that. When I'm done training and doing cool stuff with dogs, I want a Cavalier King Charles that sits in my lap and stares in my eyes and tells me it loves me. That's all I want. But right now, I want lunatics. I want crazy dogs that like doing crazy things, because so do I,
That's a good point, where both of you closed off on that. I've had a suspicion about this. I could be quite wrong, but I'm curious, Dr. Melanie, your thoughts on it. I think that there is an incredibly large influence by pharmaceutical companies with the drugs that they're pushing into the pet space. Where do your thoughts sit with that?
That's opening a whole new can of worms and bugs and all the
Maybe that's a
maybe
topic.
We should save that for another episode, because that feels like a big topic that we could really bite in and chew.
Yeah, I mean, as a one or two sentence, for one, it's overprescribed. No one can, everyone, not everyone, but people will fight me on that, but it's overprescribed. And two, it doesn't do what we think it does. And these two things together is a dangerous status quo that no one should be happy with. And vets and veterinary behaviorists, they do it because that's what they can do, right? If someone comes and you need help with a super anxious dog, they don't know how to train necessarily, but they can prescribe. And it's a seemingly much quicker fix.
And there's money in it. There's lots of money in it.
Sure. Yeah. There's obviously the money aspect of that too. And then the other part of it is we do understand more so now than ever before that anxiety, even in humans, PTSD and depression, there's nothing wrong in terms of there's an imbalance of serotonin or imbalance of any kind of neurotransmitters. There is some sort of dysfunction in certain circuits that fire at certain times that influence or are being influenced by neurotransmitters. Now, if you mess with a neurotransmitter holistically or globally in the entire brain, you may hit the right dysfunction somewhere in the brain that might fix it, but you also have a bunch of other things happening. And we can influence this behaviorally too. We don't need to necessarily have medication for that. It's just this idea that now my dog is feeling so much better. Does it though? Like, comes back to the emotions. Was it just suppressed? Was it actually depressed? Was it actually, lackluster? Is it now just aligning better to what you think your dog should be like? Or is your dog actually happier? I don't know.
Dr. Melanie, we've probably taken up too much of your time. Thank you so much for coming on with us. It's
Absolutely.
been fascinating to me. And I want to thank you for the work you're doing. I think that you're doing the Lord's work in a way that I don't do, right? Like, the heat that you've exposed yourself to is incredible, and you've handled it with grace in a way that I know I wouldn't be able to.
You're a true professional.
Possibly could have. So well done to you. Plug all your stuff. How do they learn more from you? How do they support you in what you're doing?
I think people find me if they want to learn more, and I'm everywhere. I seem to be everywhere nowadays on social media and podcasts. I would say this, like, if there's anything that, intellectually, scientifically tickles someone, I think they will find me. My website actually happens to be the least frequently visited. Like, I don't even know what's on there anymore because I'm not on it that often either. But social media is the way to find me. And on social media, whenever I have like little pop-ups, webinars, or little mini programs that are ongoing, find there too the announcement. And a good start always on my Instagram in particular. I have free guides. I have 15 or so free guides on all kinds of topics where I dissect what I usually talk about with all references. One thing I will say is, as maybe a closing word, as much as I criticize the narrative of force-free is the way to go, there has to be some criticism within the balanced training world as well. And for one, the ones that do know what they're doing, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't applying to you and your listeners, is the risk of really abusing the tools, and we all know and see that this exists, is more dramatic than the risk of abusing rewards, right? We can certainly argue that, as we mentioned before, they are more anxious and there's incomplete learning, but the immediate risk to the welfare is a little bit exaggerated with abusing e-collars or prong collars, and it's closer to the physical abuse that we all don't want. Mm-hmm. So it is on us, in a way, to weapon ourselves with a very thorough understanding and how to communicate certain things better so that we can differentiate ourselves, and I'm just including myself here, from those who are maybe a little bit more old school and a little bit more abusive and choosing the quick fixes. Right? We kind of have to put in the effort to maybe choose different phrases, because we're kind of using the same thing as we justify sometimes, or get defensive because we are being put in the position of defending because they have the higher moral ground from which they look down on people who would use aversive control. I think that narrative has to change from defensive to being offensive more so. And we can do that by differentiating ourselves also in terms of how we talk about this and how we intellectually talk about it, from those who are rather abusive, and then call out those to make now room for those that, some even parts of some from the force-free community are closer to us than the extremes, and kind of come together that way. Why did I say this? Oh, and that's hence the free guides, so that there are these studies that support certain aspects of it, that, whether you read the title or just, type it into Google and print it out, or just have it and pin it somewhere, that you have also something solid to underline, the training that you've been doing, that is good for dogs. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do here.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. Glenn, got anything?
I just want to say to everybody out there that people like you, Melanie, need to be protected in the vast society. And it's not because you're just saying things that I agree with. It's because you're brave enough to talk about material that people will take offense to, and they will find a little bit frightening and a little bit challenging. But nonetheless, you still are brave enough to take all that heat that you revealed to us, the impact it actually has on your life and everything like that. But nonetheless, you still stand up and you still say what needs to be said, and you still bring the realities of the news, and then you still cite real science, and then you have backups with it as well. And I feel that when I'm listening to any dialogue from people like yourself or anybody else in the community that is prepared to make a classy example of it and then back it up as well, I'm very interested in what you say, because I've been duped as well. I've been made to feel angry, and I've defended people who have tricked me and made me feel emotionally violated. Whereas now what I'm trying to do is trying to hear it from all sides. And we confess, we all have, that some people in the force-free communities have made us better trainers. They brought to light techniques and processes that we really need to indoctrinate into our programs and think about things in a better way. There have been little nuances that I thought, yeah, that really makes sense, and that's going to make me a more furnished trainer at the end of the day. But I just want to thank you very much. I'm a big fan of your work. I read practically everything you put out there. It's terrific. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, I really would love to have you back on more regularly. We did say it at the first episode, because I re-listened to it just so I could prepare for this one. We did say that we were going to ask our Canine Paradigm followers or anybody out there if they've got questions for you, and we could put a bunch of questions together and send them to you and then have you back on so you could actually answer listener questions as well. Because I think that would be a way to acknowledge the people that spend time listening to podcasts and listening to your work and so forth, if they could actually have a way of talking to you.
Yeah, I love that. Let's totally do that. I'm happy to come more regularly, or whenever you summon me, I'll be there.
Wonderful.
Amazing. Perfect. All right. I'm doing the wrap up. That's it for another episode of the Canine Paradigm. As always, if you like what you hear, just like, rate, share, subscribe. Do that through whatever subscription service you download us from. Then go to another one. Do it there. If they don't check, you can do whatever you want.
Just go to all of them.
Nobody's the boss of you.
Just go to all of them and tick 5 stars.
Do whatever you want. No
Everyone.
one's a fucking boss of you.
You say that, but maybe they are.
Yeah, maybe they are.
Hmm.
Of course, I suppose. If you want to support the show, best way to do that is jump into Patreon. A few bucks a month gets you a giant backlog of information as well as new stuff going forward. You could pay as much or as little as you like, to be honest. I mean, if you wanted to buy me a Lamborghini, I definitely would accept it.
I'm looking for a tractor. I've given up my Bentley career. I need a tractor. I've got a farm. I need a tractor.
Well, Lamborghini is a tractor company.
They are. That's true. They started off selling tractors. You're right. I'll have a Lamborghini tractor like Jeremy Clarkson.
Do you know that's the story of Lamborghinis?
Yes.
Him and Enzo Ferrari had falling out, and he was like, well, fuck you. I'll make my own.
There was the pressure from Enzo. Enzo created Lamborghini. Yes. See, aversives do work.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Drove him to motivation.
Yep.
So what am I up to? Oh, T-shirts. Get a T-shirt. There's links in the show notes at Spring. You could get a wall tapestry, giant tapestry. Don't be afraid. Don't get the small one. Go big.
Yeah.
And if you want to get in touch with us, probably the best way to do that is jump into the Facebook discussion group. We'll post about this episode, and you'll be able to thank Dr. Melanie for her contributions under the episode there. So jump in there. But if you want to discuss something with us privately, you could email us. We are info@thecanineparadigm.com. Love you all. Goodbye.
Na 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 na